Hello everyone, it's me, Giles with a J, the person who personally narrates this channel. Just remember, that will never change. We're on season 21 and the theme is strange and unusual, so if you have any suggestions that fit that theme, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, if you enjoy the show, slap that subscribe button, uppercut the like button, and turn on notifications. I post new episodes twice a week, a long episode every Monday and a shorter episode every Thursday. Now, on to the show. In 1986, a family was terrified to learn that a teenage boy had been living in their house without their knowledge. It was a crime that horrified and baffled the community, but at least nobody had been harmed physically. Unfortunately, when the culprit was released on bail, he would escalate from being a creep to being a murderer. This is Monsters. Daniel LaPlante was born on May 15, 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts. His childhood was broken, which later shaped his violent behavior. His parents divorced and he lived mostly with his mother, who later remarried and had 2 more sons. Daniel said he suffered severe sexual and psychological abuse from several adults in his life, including his father, stepfather, and psychiatrist. Daniel's most important challenges started early in life. He had dyslexia, attention deficit disorder, and other learning disabilities. Those made school extremely difficult, and his classmates saw him as creepy and weird, which left him isolated. A former classmate remembered him, saying, quote, "The guy never really was all that friendly. He never liked to go to parties. He never really talked much." Kids at school called him the class creep because of his poor hygiene and odd behavior. That bullying pushed him further into isolation, and his family sent him to a psychiatrist to help with his troubling behavior. The doctor diagnosed him with hyperactivity disorder, now called ADHD. Daniel later said that only made things worse, claiming that the psychiatrist had sexually abused him. Daniel started showing criminal behavior when he was 15 years old. He began with small thefts, which experts say could have been a coping mechanism to give him some form of control. His crimes grew into breaking into homes in his neighborhood to steal valuables, jewelry, and money. He turned those break-ins into psychological games with his victims. Sometimes he would steal items, other times he would just move furniture around or swap stolen items with random things he brought himself. Nobody seemed to notice how dangerous he was becoming. His stepfather once found a gun he had stolen in Daniel's laundry basket, and when he asked about it, Daniel just said he had purchased it. Apparently, the 16-year-old having bought a gun was perfectly acceptable. His increasingly serious crimes ended up escalating in strange and unusual ways. Now, the most talked about part of this case has turned into somewhat of an urban legend, and the story that gets told isn't accurate. Because of that, true crime retellings can oftentimes be incorrect. The version that gets repeated includes a different family and a different origin story for how Daniel and the teenage girl he calls met. In the fictionalized version, Daniel broke into the home of the Andrews family and stole their phone number so he could call their daughter Annie. He asked her out, claiming he got her number from a friend, and she agreed. While they were out, Daniel insisted on talking about Annie's deceased mother, which turned her off and she refused to see him again. A few days later, Annie and her sister decided to hold a seance to try and communicate with their mother from beyond the grave. After that, strange things started happening around the house. They started hearing a strange tapping sound in the walls. The TV would turn on by itself. Then one day, they went into the basement and saw the words, quote, "I'm in your room, come find me," written on the wall in what looked like blood. When their father got home, he checked the basement and found that the words had been written in ketchup, and he thought his daughters were pulling a prank. A few days later, another message was written on the wall, and the daughters convinced their father that it had not been them. He searched the house, and when he opened an upstairs closet door, he found a teen boy wearing his dead wife's wedding dress, messed up makeup, and a blonde wig. He was wielding a hatchet, and the two struggled before the intruder got away. When the police arrived, they searched the house, found the tunnels, and eventually stumbled upon the teen still hiding in the residence. That story is not true, and though it shares some details, it has more sensational elements added, particularly the seance and the wife's wedding dress. Still, the real story is quite strange. In December of 1986, Daniel called 15-year-old Tina Bowen of Pepperell, Massachusetts, just east of Townsend. It's not clear exactly where Daniel had met Tina, but he asked her out on a date over the phone, which she agreed to. When she met him, though, he was not as he had described, being fairly dirty and unkempt, an early pre-internet catfishing of sorts. When the date ended, Daniel asked Tina to be his girlfriend, and she politely declined, to which he seemed to accept without issue. Afterward, Daniel's initially passive demeanor transformed as he began systematically stalking Tina. Their brief interaction had sparked an unhealthy fixation in the young man, who was drawn to Tina's kind and approachable nature. Instead of merely watching from afar, Daniel took his obsession to extraordinary lengths. Using his burglary skills, he infiltrated the Bowen family home and created a network of hidden spaces inside the walls. Those concealed passages, some reportedly measuring just inches wide, became his secret dwelling. Throughout that period, which may have lasted from several months up to 3 years, the family frequently noticed unexplained phenomena. Objects mysteriously moved, television channels changed without explanation, and food disappeared inexplicably. The situation reached its terrifying climax on December 8, 1986. Upon returning home at approximately 5:30 p.m., the Bowens found their house in chaos, with radios and televisions blaring at maximum volume. As Tina's father, Frank Bowen, methodically searched the home, he opened a closet on the upper floor and came face to face with Daniel. The teenager stood before him with his face painted reportedly with ketchup and mayonnaise, hair styled in spiked tufts, wearing a fur coat and clutching Frank's own hatchet along with a steel wrench. Daniel calmly ordered Frank to take his daughters to a bedroom, but that wasn't Frank's style. Protecting his children, Frank managed to slam and barricade the bedroom door before Daniel could follow. In a desperate act of courage, Tina jumped from a second-story window and ran to a neighbor's house to call the police. Upon arrival at the Bowen residence, police first made sure the residents were out of harm's way. Frank quickly helped to lower his younger daughter and her friend to safety through a bedroom window before informing officers about the hatchet-wielding intruder inside the home. The responding officers conducted a thorough sweep of the property, yet found no trace of Daniel, who seemed to have vanished without explanation. As the investigation progressed, officers discovered that Daniel hadn't simply broken in. He had been secretly living inside the walls. Officers uncovered an elaborate network of tunnels and small spaces within the home's structure that Daniel had constructed to move undetected between rooms. The passages allowed him to spy on family members through peepholes he had strategically cut. Throughout the search, investigators weren't able to figure out where the intruder had gone. A tracking dog brought to the scene failed to identify a trail, possibly because authorities had given the dog Frank's own hatchet to detect a scent. On top of that, the face paint and bizarre appearance had made identifying the suspect difficult, as family descriptions varied widely regarding his age and features. The Bowen family, shaken by the ordeal, relocated to a nearby hotel while the investigation continued. Nevertheless, their nightmare was far from over. On December 10th, Frank Bowen returned to retrieve some belongings and noticed a figure in the window. An officer responded to the scene where he discovered a terrifying message. A knife had been stabbed through a family photo with the words, quote, "I'm still here, come find me," written in marker. On another wall, a second family picture had been defaced with, quote, "I'm going to kill you all," alongside another knife. The officers searched the home again, even calling in backup, but they didn't find anything. Sure that there was someone still hiding somewhere, the officers went through the house again and found a small entrance to the crawl space near the foundation of the house. They immediately drew their weapons, believing they had cornered the suspect. As they peeked into the crawl space, they found Daniel hiding inside. He was arrested and held in a juvenile facility while the authorities decided whether or not they would charge him as an adult for his crimes. When he was finally charged, as an adult, for breaking into the Bowen house and for holding the family against their will, he was given $10,000 bail. His mother got a second mortgage on her house in order to pay the bail, and he was released in October of 1987. As soon as Daniel was released, he began actively seeking firearms and ammunition. He stole multiple guns from his neighbor Raymond Pendel's home, including a .22 caliber firearm. Throughout late November, Daniel approached both his brother and a friend requesting bullets. He fabricated a story about wanting to make and sell a large bullet. The friend ultimately provided Daniel with several .22 caliber bullets from his personal carton. Court documents later revealed that Daniel practiced loading and unloading the weapon in preparation. On November 16, 1987, between 11:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m., Daniel broke into the Townsend home of Andrew and Priscilla Gustoson. That wasn't merely an opportunistic theft, it represented a significant escalation in his criminal pattern. Throughout his 4-hour invasion of the empty house, Daniel methodically collected various items including a cordless telephone, 2 cable television boxes, a cable television remote control device, and coins from a Liberty Silver dollar collection. After the burglary, Daniel took specific steps to conceal his crimes. He hid the Gustafsons' cordless telephone and the cable box in his brother's tool cabinet, specifically telling his brother that he was placing them there to prevent his parents from discovering them. That calculated approach demonstrated both premeditation and awareness of his actions' criminal nature. The November break-in marked only the beginning of Daniel's fixation on the Gustafson property. For several weeks thereafter, he continued burglarizing multiple homes throughout the neighborhood, establishing a pattern that would culminate in his return to the Gustafson residence less than 2 weeks later. On December 1, 1987, Daniel returned to the Gustafson residence and continued his creepy behavior. 33-year-old Priscilla, a nursery school teacher who was several months pregnant with her third child, arrived home while Daniel was still there. She had her 5-year-old son William with her. Instead of fleeing as he typically did during daytime burglaries, Daniel remained inside. He ambushed and then tied the mother to her bed in the master bedroom and locked William in a closet. Daniel sexually assaulted Priscilla before executing her with 2 shots fired at point-blank range through a pillow placed over her head. After murdering Priscilla, Daniel's violence escalated as he drowned William in the upstairs bathtub. His rampage might have ended there had 7-year-old Abigail not returned from school. In fact, the young girl suffered additional trauma beyond drowning. Court records revealed she sustained blunt force trauma to her head and compression to her neck before being submerged face down in the downstairs bathtub. Earlier that day, Andrew Gustafson had closed a significant deal as a small-town lawyer and had attempted to call Priscilla to arrange a celebratory dinner. Receiving no answer, he drove the mile to their home, arriving at about 5 p.m. Once inside the house, Andrew discovered his wife's bloodied body in their bedroom. He would later say, quote, "I was too afraid of going to look for my children because I was afraid I'd find them dead." As he waited in a police cruiser outside, an officer delivered the devastating news that both Abigail and William had been found drowned in separate bathrooms. The murder of an entire family sent shockwaves through the small community as residents struggled to comprehend such senseless violence. 2 days after the Gustafson murders, police questioned Daniel but lacked sufficient evidence for an immediate arrest. When officers returned to Daniel's residence for further questioning on December 3rd, the suspect spotted them approaching and immediately leapt off the porch, disappearing into the surrounding area. That sudden flight prompted authorities to launch a full-scale manhunt involving police units, tracking dogs, and helicopters. Lieutenant Robert Lane, who had previously documented Daniel's wall-dwelling activities at the Bowen residence, joined the search efforts, believing the teen might head toward familiar territory in northwest Pepperell. As the search intensified, local resident Lynn McGovern approached Lieutenant Lane on Jewett Street expressing discomfort about entering her home alone. She explained, quote, "I drove into the driveway and into the garage. I immediately drove back out and sat in the driveway feeling extremely uncomfortable." Her instincts proved correct. Upon entering with the lieutenant, she discovered Daniel had invaded her home. The teen had armed himself with multiple weapons, including a revolver, shotgun, and high-powered rifle before jumping from a second-floor window onto a garage roof as officers arrived. Shortly thereafter, Daniel appeared on Elm Street where he forcibly entered Pam Michaela's residence. Upon recognizing the fugitive, the woman began screaming as Daniel compelled her at gunpoint to drive him away from the area. The desperate teen's plan faltered when Pam managed to jump from the moving vehicle, leaving him to continue his escape alone. After Pam's daring escape, Registry of Motor Vehicles Inspector Charlie Nelson spotted Daniel driving the stolen vehicle in nearby Ayer. When confronted, Daniel abandoned the car and fled into a local lumber yard where he threatened the owner with his weapon. At last, the manhunt concluded that evening when officers discovered the exhausted teenager hiding inside a dumpster. 2 officers maintained guard over Daniel until reinforcements arrived to take him into custody, ending the community's terror approximately 48 hours after the search began. Investigators didn't have a hard time building a solid case against Daniel. Meticulous forensic work and physical evidence definitively linked him to the brutal murders of Priscilla and the children. Laboratory analysis provided crucial biological connections between Daniel and the Gustoson murder scene. Most notably, testing revealed the teen was a type A secretor, precisely matching the semen stain discovered on the bedspread where Priscilla's body was found. Forensic specialists discovered fibers with identical microscopic and optical characteristics in multiple locations. On Daniel's clothing worn the day of the murders, on socks found in his bedroom, on the belt recovered with the murder weapon, and at 3 separate locations within the crime scene itself. Furthermore, fiber samples taken from a brown sock believed to have been used as a gag matched samples found on the gray shirt Daniel wore on the December 1st attack. Physical evidence from Daniel's November 16th burglary provided additional connections to the crime. Following the murders, investigators discovered he had hidden the Gustoson's cordless telephone in a cable box in his brother's tool cabinet. Other stolen property from the Gustoson home, including a cable remote control and coins from the silver dollar collection, were likewise traced back to Daniel, establishing his prior knowledge and access to the residence. The most damning evidence came through ballistics testing. The .22 caliber firearm used to kill Priscilla was conclusively identified as one of 2 guns Daniel had stolen from his neighbor's home. Authorities recovered the murder weapon on April 7, 1988, when Daniel's brother Stephen discovered it hidden in the glove compartment of an abandoned vehicle on the family's property. Subsequent ballistic tests and laboratory analysis confirmed the bullets recovered from the crime scene matched the same brand, caliber class, and casing composition as those Daniel obtained from his friend. The selection of Priscilla and her family as targets was far from random. Their home sat on an isolated knoll in wooded terrain that Daniel frequently traversed, with only a stretch of trees separating the teenager's residence from his victims. That geographic connection aligns with established criminological theories suggesting that offenders typically select victims within their familiar territory. As one study notes, serious crimes often occur in areas where perpetrators feel comfortable navigating escape routes and understanding potential police response times. Moreover, the relative seclusion of the Gustoson property provided minimal witness potential, a critical factor in Daniel's ability to enter and exit undetected during his initial November break-in. The Gustoson household presented an ideal target based on predictable patterns of occupancy. Throughout late autumn of 1987, Daniel had carefully observed the family's routine, noting when the home was empty during weekday hours. Experts in victimology point out that such lifestyle patterns significantly impact victim vulnerability. By monitoring the family's schedule, Daniel identified optimal windows for criminal activity with minimal risk of interruption. Upon his December 1st break-in, circumstances changed unexpectedly when Priscilla arrived home with her young son, William. Yet as court documents reveal, Daniel made the fateful decision to remain inside rather than flee as he typically would. Forensic psychologists examining the case identified multiple potential motivations behind Daniel's actions. Primarily among them was opportunity. Having already successfully burglarized the home, Daniel likely felt emboldened to return. Yet his decision to murder rather than escape upon Priscilla's arrival suggests deeper psychological factors at play. Unlike victims in similar cases, no evidence indicates any personal connection between Daniel and the Gustosons before his criminal activities began. Therefore, experts hypothesize the killings represented an escalation of power-seeking behavior amid Daniel's deteriorating mental state, especially given his documented antisocial personality traits. A year after the murders, Daniel LaPlante was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 3 life sentences without parole. A 2013 ruling made it unconstitutional to sentence juveniles to life without parole eligibility, so a judge resentenced Daniel to make him eligible for parole after 45 years. Yet in 2019, his attorney argued that it still constituted the functional equivalent of life without parole. The legal team sought parole eligibility after 30 to 35 years, citing a 2019 law allowing juveniles convicted of murder to request parole after serving 30 years. Ultimately, the Supreme Judicial Court unanimously upheld Daniel's 45-year sentence, meaning he'll likely remain in prison until at least age 62. Throughout those legal battles, Gustoson family members consistently opposed any possibility of Daniel's release, notwithstanding Daniel's courtroom apology where he said, quote, "I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow." Despite what he said, a psychiatrist claimed Daniel showed no empathy and continued to minimize his behaviors. Priscilla's sister, Christine Morgan, testified her sister wouldn't want Daniel freed. Similarly, Andrew Gustoson's second wife Carol revealed Andrew remained plagued by nightmares of his family's murder until his 2014 death from cancer. Her testimony was unequivocal, quote, "Do not let this man out. He should rot in prison." Daniel LaPlante shocked people by invading the Bowen family's home in a case that still ranks as one of Massachusetts' strangest crimes. Authorities unfortunately assumed it was teen mischief and that Daniel would be okay while out on bail. They didn't realize that the downward spiral in his mental health would make him immediately continue his habit of breaking into houses and eventually turn him into a monster. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave a comment. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.